The marble floor. The golden elevator doors reflected Miguel's weathered hands as he wrung out the mop for the third time that evening. At 45, his back ached from years of bending, scrubbing, and polishing the pristine marble floors of the Grandview Hotel. The lobby gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, each surface meticulously maintained to uphold the establishment's five-star reputation. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, and noticed them again, the two children who had been sitting on the plush velvet bench for over 2 hours. The little girl, maybe 8 years old, clutched a worn stuffed rabbit against her chest, while her younger brother swung his legs absently, his sneakers barely reaching the floor. Their clothes were clean but clearly not from the high-end boutiques that most hotel guests frequented. Miguel's heart clenched. Something about their stillness, their patient waiting, reminded him of his own childhood, sitting in similar lobbies, hospital waiting rooms, government offices, always waiting while the adults in their lives navigated complex situations beyond a child's understanding. "Excuse me, sir." The voice belonged to the hotel's assistant manager, Ms. Richardson, a sharp woman in her 30s who wore her authority like armor. Her heels clicked against the marble as she approached, each step echoing in the vast space. "We need this area completely spotless before the evening gala. The mayor and several city council members will be arriving within the hour." Miguel nodded, accustomed to such reminders. "Of course, ma'am." Almost finished. Ms. Richardson's gaze shifted to the children on the bench. Her expression tightened slightly. "Are those children unaccompanied? We can't have unattended minors in the lobby during such an important event." "I don't know, ma'am," Miguel replied honestly, though he'd been wondering the same thing. "They've been there since I started my shift." She pursed her lips and strode toward the children, her manner professional but not unkind. Miguel continued mopping, but he couldn't help listening to their conversation. "Hello there, Ms. Richardson said, her voice taking on the artificially sweet tone adults often used with children. "Are you waiting for someone?" The little girl looked up with large, dark eyes that seemed far too serious for her age. "Yes, ma'am. Our mom. She's in a meeting upstairs." "I see. And what's your mother's name? Perhaps I can call her room." The boy spoke up for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. "She doesn't have a room. She's just meeting with someone." Ms. Richardson's expression grew more concerned. "How long have you been waiting?" "Since lunchtime," the girl replied, unconsciously tightening her grip on the stuffed rabbit. Miguel's mop stilled in his hands. Since lunchtime, that was nearly 6 hours ago. His own children flashed through his mind. Elena, now 22 and working as a nurse in Phoenix, and Carlos, 19 and studying engineering at the community college. He remembered the countless times he'd brought them to his various jobs when childcare fell through, how they'd sit quietly in break rooms or empty offices, entertaining themselves while he worked to keep food on their table. "Well, Ms. Richardson said after a pause, I'm sure she'll be down soon. But perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our family lounge. It has games and books." The girl shook her head politely. "Thank you, but Mom said to wait right here. She said she'd come back to this exact spot." Something in the child's tone, the unwavering obedience mixed with barely concealed worry, struck Miguel deeply. He'd heard that same tone in his own children's voices during their most difficult years, when his wife Maria was battling cancer and he was working 3 jobs to cover medical bills. Ms. Richardson glanced at her watch, clearly torn between compassion and protocol. "I'll check with the front desk to see if anyone has inquired about you too, all right?" As she walked away, heels clicking with renewed urgency, Miguel found himself drifting closer to the bench. The boy looked up at him with curious eyes. "That's a really clean floor," the boy observed. Miguel smiled despite himself. "Thank you, young man. I work hard to keep it that way." "Our mom cleans floors too," the girl said suddenly, then looked as if she regretted speaking. The pieces began falling into place for Miguel. The children's clothes, clean but not expensive. Their patient, practiced waiting. The way they sat perfectly still, careful not to cause any trouble. Their mother was likely working somewhere in this very building, perhaps in one of the offices upstairs, or maybe she was part of the cleaning crew for another company. "What's your name?" Miguel asked gently, leaning on his mop handle. "I'm Sarah, and this is Tommy," the girl replied. "I'm Miguel." I've been working here for 8 years. Tommy's eyes widened. 8 years. That's older than me. Miguel chuckled. It is indeed. And in all that time, I've learned that this building has a lot of good people in it. Your mom must be a hard worker if she's here. Sarah nodded vigorously. She works really hard. She has 3 jobs. Sometimes she brings us with her when Mrs. Garcia can't watch us. The familiar pang hit Miguel's chest again. Mrs. Garcia was likely a neighbor or relative who helped with childcare, another piece of the working parent puzzle he knew all too well. Ms. Richardson returned, her expression grave. There's no record of any meetings scheduled for this evening, and no one has inquired about children. I think we need to. Please, Sarah interrupted, her composure finally cracking. Please don't make us leave. Mom said she'd come back here. She always keeps her promises. Tears began forming in her eyes, and Tommy instinctively moved closer to his sister. Miguel felt something break inside his chest. Ma'am, he said quietly to Ms. Richardson, if I may, could we give them a little more time? The gala doesn't start for another hour. Ms. Richardson studied Miguel's face, then looked back at the children. Her expression softened slightly. I suppose, but if their mother doesn't appear soon, I'll have to call child services. It's policy. As she walked away again, Miguel sat down on the bench beside the children, his cleaning cart nearby. Tell me about your mom, he said gently. Sarah wiped her eyes with her sleeve. She's the best mom in the world. She makes really good pancakes, and she reads to us every night, even when she's super tired. She bought me this truck, Tommy added, pulling a small toy car from his pocket. The paint was worn, but it was clearly treasured. And when I was scared during the thunderstorm last week, she let me sleep in her bed and told me stories about brave princesses, Sarah continued. Miguel nodded, recognizing the picture they painted, a mother doing everything she could with limited resources, making sacrifices daily to provide for her children. Where's your dad? He asked carefully. Sarah's face closed off. He left when I was 6. Mom says he wasn't ready to be a family man. The familiar anger rose in Miguel's throat. Not at this child, but at the countless fathers who abandoned their responsibilities, leaving women to struggle alone. He thought of his own father, who'd worked double shifts at the factory to support 5 children, who'd never missed a school play or soccer game despite his exhaustion. Your mom sounds like an amazing person, Miguel said. She is, Tommy said firmly. She's just. Sometimes her meetings run really long. Miguel glanced at the clock above the reception desk. 7:30. The gala would begin soon, and the lobby would fill with elegantly dressed guests. He made a decision. You know what? I think you two might be more comfortable in the staff break room. It's quieter, and there's a vending machine with snacks. Sarah shook her head again. We have to wait here. Mom was very specific. What if, Miguel said carefully, we could see this exact spot from the break room? There's a window that looks out onto the lobby. You could watch for your mom and be more comfortable. Sarah considered this, her 8-year-old mind weighing the pros and cons. You promise we could see her when she comes back? I promise. 20 minutes later, Miguel was sitting with Sarah and Tommy in the small employee break room, sharing his dinner, a sandwich Maria had packed for him that morning. The children ate gratefully, and Miguel realized they were probably hungry. Through the window, they watched as the lobby began filling with guests in evening wear. Women in glittering gowns glided across the marble Miguel had polished, men in perfectly tailored tuxedos laughed and shook hands. The contrast wasn't lost on him, the two worlds that existed in the same space but rarely intersected. Wow, Tommy breathed, his face pressed against the glass. They look like princes and princesses. Sarah was quieter, her stuffed rabbit in her lap. Do you think something happened to Mom? The question hung in the air like a weight. Miguel had been wondering the same thing for hours now. No responsible parent left their children unattended for this long without explanation. I think, Miguel said carefully, that your mom is probably dealing with something difficult. Sometimes adult problems take longer to solve than we expect. Like when she had to go to court about the apartment. Sarah asked. Miguel's heart sank further. Eviction proceedings, perhaps, or disputes with landlords, another layer of struggle he recognized from his own past. Something like that, yes. At 8:15, Ms. Richardson appeared in the break room doorway. Her expression was kind but firm. I'm sorry, but I really do need to call child services now. We can't leave children unattended overnight. Sarah began crying in earnest now, and Tommy joined her. The sound was heartbreaking. The desperate wails of children who understood, on some level, that their world was falling apart. Please, Sarah sobbed. Just a little longer. She's coming back. She always comes back. Miguel stood up, his mind racing. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text from Maria. Don't forget Alina's birthday call tonight. Love you. His family. His stable, secure family with their small house and steady routines. His wife who'd beaten cancer and now worked part-time at the library. His children who'd gone to college and built good lives for themselves. He thought about the choices that had led him here, the years of sacrifice, the multiple jobs, the nights he'd fallen asleep in his work clothes. But also Maria's strength, the community that had helped them through hard times, and the random acts of kindness from strangers that had kept them afloat. Ms. Richardson, he said quietly, I'd like to make some phone calls before you contact child services. Give me 15 minutes. She hesitated, then nodded. 15 minutes. Miguel stepped into the hallway and dialed Alina's number first. Dad, I was just about to call you for my birthday. Happy birthday, Mija, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Listen, I need a favor. Within 10 minutes, Elena had made 6 phone calls to social worker friends and given Miguel 3 direct numbers. His next call was to Father Martinez at St. Catherine's, who knew every social service agency in the city. The third was to his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who ran an informal network of women who helped families in crisis. By 8:45, Miguel had a plan. He returned to the break room where Sarah and Tommy sat huddled together, their tears exhausted. Ms. Richardson waited nearby, her phone in her hand. I've found some people who can help, Miguel told them gently. People who specialize in finding missing parents and helping families stay together. Sarah looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Really, really. And until we find your mom, my friend Mrs. Rodriguez has offered to let you stay with her family. She has grandchildren your age. Ms. Richardson looked relieved. Is this official? Father Martinez is driving over with a social worker right now. They'll make sure everything is done properly. An hour later, Miguel watched as Sarah and Tommy climbed into Mrs. Rodriguez's car, their small hands clutching overnight bags that hotel staff had hastily assembled with toiletries and snacks. Sarah still held her stuffed rabbit, and Tommy had his toy truck. You'll keep looking for our mom? Sarah asked through the car window. Every day until we find her, Miguel promised. As the car pulled away, Ms. Richardson stood beside Miguel on the hotel's front steps. That was a good thing you did, she said quietly. Miguel nodded, but his heart was heavy. Somewhere in this city, a mother was either unable to return to her children or didn't know they were missing. Either scenario was devastating. The next morning, Miguel arrived at work to find a police detective waiting for him. Officer Martinez, no relation to the priest, was a kind-faced woman in her 40s. I understand you were the last person to see Carmen Ruiz, she said. Carmen. Finally, a name for the mother who'd been haunting his thoughts all night. I never actually saw her, Miguel clarified. Just her children. Officer Martinez nodded, consulting her notes. Carmen Ruiz, 31, mother of 2. She was here yesterday for a job interview with Peterson and Associates. They have offices on the 15th floor. Miguel's heart skipped. An interview. Then the interview ended at 2:30. She was supposed to pick up the children by 3. Officer Martinez's expression was grim. No one has seen her since she left the Peterson offices. The implications hit Miguel like a physical blow. Something had happened to Carmen between leaving her job interview and returning to collect her children. Something that had prevented her from coming back to the 2 people who were her entire world. Have you checked hospitals? Maybe she had an accident. That was our first thought. We've checked every hospital and urgent care facility in a 50-mile radius. No Carmen Ruiz matching her description has been admitted. Miguel sank into a chair, the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. What about the job interview? Maybe someone there knows something. We're interviewing everyone at Peterson and Associates this morning. The interview was for a cleaning position with their contracted service company. According to the office manager, Carmen seemed nervous but hopeful. She mentioned needing the job because she was behind on rent. The picture was becoming clearer and more heartbreaking by the hour. A single mother, facing eviction, taking her children to what might have been their salvation, a steady job that could keep a roof over their heads. Instead, somewhere between hope and home, she'd vanished. Over the next 3 days, Miguel found himself deeply involved in the search for Carmen Ruiz. He distributed flyers during his breaks, called hospitals that hadn't been checked yet, and drove through neighborhoods where she might have gone. Sarah and Tommy were staying with Mrs. Rodriguez, who reported that they were quiet but seemed to be adjusting. Sarah asked about her mother every morning and every night. Tommy had stopped playing with his toy truck. On the 4th day, the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Miguel was polishing the brass fixtures in the hotel lobby when his phone rang. It was Father Martinez. "Miguel, we found her." The relief was overwhelming. "Is she?" "She's alive, but she's been in the county hospital under the name Jane Doe. She was hit by a car while crossing the street 4 blocks from the hotel. She's been unconscious since the accident, and she had no identification with her." Miguel's legs felt weak, "But she's going to be okay. The doctors say she's stable. She woke up this morning and the first thing she asked about was her children." That evening, Miguel stood outside Carmen Ruiz's hospital room, watching through the window as Sarah and Tommy clung to their mother. Carmen was pale and bandaged, her left leg in a cast, but her arms were strong enough to hold her children. Mrs. Rodriguez stood beside Miguel, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Look at them," she whispered. "Just look at that love." Miguel nodded, unable to speak. Through the glass, he could see Carmen's lips moving, probably apologizing over and over, explaining what had happened. Sarah was crying again, but these were different tears, tears of relief and joy. A doctor approached them in the hallway. "Are you family? Friends?" Mrs. Rodriguez said quickly. "How is she?" "She'll recover fully, but it will take time. The leg fracture was complicated, and she has a concussion. She'll need physical therapy, and she won't be able to work for at least 2 months." Miguel's heart sank again. 2 months without income for a family already facing eviction. "Doctor," he said, "is there a social worker we could speak with about assistance programs?" The doctor nodded toward a woman in a suit standing near the nurse's station. "Janet Collins is our family services coordinator. She's already working on a plan." Over the next hour, Miguel learned about a network of support he'd never known existed. There were emergency assistance programs, temporary housing options, medical bill assistance, and job placement services for people recovering from injuries. "The Peterson and Associates position is still available," Janet Collins explained. "They've agreed to hold it for her until she's medically cleared to work." But Miguel knew that 2 months of medical recovery would still leave the family in a precarious position. That night, he called Elena. "Dad, you can't solve everyone's problems," she said gently after he'd explained the situation. "I'm not trying to solve everyone's problems. Just this one family's problems." Elena was quiet for a moment. "What are you thinking? Your old room is just sitting empty. And Mrs. Rodriguez says Carmen is a good mother, just had some bad luck. Dad, your mother and I have been talking about renting it out anyway. Carmen could help with light housekeeping while she recovers, and the kids could have a stable place to stay." Elena sighed, but Miguel could hear the smile in her voice. "You already talked to Mom about this, didn't you? She may have mentioned that the house feels too empty these days." 2 weeks later, Miguel helped Carmen and her children move into Elena's old room. Carmen was still on crutches, but her eyes were bright with hope. Sarah had started smiling again, and Tommy had returned to playing with his truck. "I don't know how to thank you," Carmen said as Miguel carried in their few belongings. "You don't need to thank me," Miguel replied. "Just focus on getting better." "But why?" she pressed. "Why would you help strangers like this?" Miguel paused in the doorway, thinking about his answer. Finally, he said, "Because 20 years ago, when my wife was sick and I was working 3 jobs, a stranger helped us. A man I'd never met paid our electric bill 1 month when we were about to lose power. He said he'd been where we were and wanted to help." Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "Did you ever find out who he was?" "No, but I never forgot what he taught me. that sometimes the only thing standing between a family and disaster is another person's kindness. 6 months later, Carmen was back to work, this time with the cleaning service that contracted with the Grandview Hotel. Miguel would see her occasionally during shift changes, always accompanied by her children during school holidays. Sarah had grown taller and more confident. She'd joined the school's reading club and often carried library books in her backpack. Tommy had started kindergarten and made friends quickly, his natural cheerfulness restored. Carmen had saved enough money to move into a small apartment near the children's school, but she stayed in touch with Miguel and Maria. The families had Sunday dinner together once a month, and Carmen helped Maria with her English conversation classes at the community center. One evening, as Miguel was finishing his shift at the hotel, he noticed a new family in the lobby, a woman with 3 small children, sitting on the same velvet bench where he'd first seen Sarah and Tommy. The woman looked exhausted and worried, checking her phone repeatedly while trying to keep her children calm. Miguel recognized the signs immediately. He finished his work, put away his cleaning supplies, and approached the bench. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you waiting for someone?" The woman looked up with tired eyes. "Yes, I have a job interview tomorrow morning, but our childcare fell through and..." Miguel smiled. "I know someone who might be able to help. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" As he sat down on the bench, Miguel thought about the chain of kindness that had started with an unknown man paying an electric bill, continued with his own family opening their home, and now extended to this new family in crisis. The marble floors of the Grandview Hotel reflected the crystal chandeliers above, gleaming and perfect as always. But Miguel had learned that the real beauty of a place wasn't in its polished surfaces, it was in the connections between people, the moments when strangers chose to help instead of looking away, and the understanding that everyone was just one crisis away from needing a helping hand. He thought of Sarah and her stuffed rabbit, of Tommy and his toy truck, of Carmen's tears of relief in that hospital room. He thought of his own children, grown and successful, and of Maria waiting at home with dinner warming in the oven. And he thought of the countless other families who would walk through these gleaming doors, some celebrating success, others facing their darkest moments, all of them part of the endless, beautiful, heartbreaking tapestry of human experience. The golden elevator doors reflected his face as he waited to go home, and Miguel smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help, new chances to be the stranger who made the difference between hope and despair. The marble floors would need cleaning again, the brass would need polishing, and somewhere in this vast city, another family would need the kindness of someone who understood that we all carry each other, one small act at a time.